Hi, so today I want to talk about vitamin D. So we talked about vitamin C in a previous video that I made a few weeks ago. I've received a lot of comments on the French version of that video about vitamin C because most people don't realize how toxic synthetic vitamin C is. So, because of that, I made a video several weeks later about the toxicity of synthetic vitamins. I also wrote an article, a detailed article about that. It's on my website. I will put the link under this video if you want to check it out. So now I wanted to make a video about vitamin D because it's also a very famous vitamin, like maybe more, even more famous than vitamin C. It's all the craze about vitamin D since, like, I don't know, it's been 10, 15 years. So yeah, today it's a video about vitamin D, the toxicity of synthetic vitamin D, but vitamin D in general. So let's start. How was vitamin D discovered? It was discovered mainly because of rickets. That's the main disease you get when you are deficient in vitamin D. So that's what you see on the picture. You can see a picture of a kid that has rickets. So what is rickets? Rickets is just that you have like decalcification of the bones, and so your bones are really soft because of it. So your bones will deform under the weight of the rest of the body. So that's something you can see mostly in children. They have like these types of legs, this type of deformation of legs, of the legs. So we think that the Greeks, the ancient Greeks and Egyptians didn't have rickets because we didn't find any reports of this disease in these populations. But we know that there were some cases of rickets in the Roman Empire, especially after the 2nd century after AD, after Jesus. I'm not sure how you say. So it might be because more and more people were living in cities at that time, and we think also it's because of bad diets. Like the diet was becoming more of grains and less, they would get less meat in their diet. The first scientific description of rickets was described in the 17th century. At the start of the 19th century, 90% of children in the UK and in the Netherlands had rickets. So it's because we know that in the north part of Europe and the further you go from the equator, the less vitamin D you can synthesize in your skin. So it's a problem mainly in the north regions of the earth. And also in these regions, in the UK and in the Netherlands, usually the weather is not great. So you have lots of clouds and rain. So when you have lots of clouds, you have less UVs. And also at the time in the 19th century, there was a lot of pollution, lots of coal pollution. So the coal particles in the air that were blocking even more the UVs. They observe, so different scientists were studying this problem of rickets. They observed that children living in industrialized cities in Britain had more rickets than children in India, for example, or China that didn't have a good diet, but they had a lot of sunshine exposure. Okay. So we know that the vitamin D deficiency can be caused, because of a lack of sunshine and or a lack of good fats, animal fats. So, but yeah, they observed that diet was not everything, and if you spend enough time in the sun, you won't develop rickets at all. Of course, we find some cases of rickets even in sunny countries, but in that case, it's not because of vitamin D deficiencies. It's usually a deficiency of calcium in the diet. It's people who eat mainly refined grains and they don't have enough animal products in their diet. Yeah, so they discovered that keeping puppies away from light gave them rickets. they discovered that you can prevent rickets by UV exposure and also with cod liver oil. And the vitamin D was officially discovered in 1922. It was extracted from cod liver oil. So what is vitamin D? Vitamin D can only be synthesized by a photochemical process. It's important to know that. And also vitamin D is actually not really a vitamin. We now say it's really a hormone or a pro-hormone, but not really a vitamin, because what is a vitamin? A vitamin is something you find in tiny quantities in food, and you die without it. Okay, but so the case of vitamin D, it's in food, but it's not only in food, it's in sunshine. So that's why it's not really considered as a vitamin that you get from food. But yeah, more like a hormone. So we will in this video talk about the two main forms of vitamin D. Everybody has heard of vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. So we will talk about these two vitamins, but in reality there are many different forms of vitamin D. You will find in some places there are 5 forms, you can find 6 forms. In some places they will say there are 12 forms. There are many different forms of vitamin D because there are many different metabolites and isomers. Okay, but we will keep it simple and just talk about vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. So vitamin D2, that is also called ergocalciferol, it is formed by the action of UV light on ergosterol. Ergosterol is a form of pro-vitamin D2. It is found mainly in mushrooms. And it's inactive. Ergocalciferol is inactive. It needs to get activated in the liver and in the kidneys. And some studies show that vitamin D2 is less effective in our body than vitamin D3. Vitamin D3, or cholecalciferol, is made by the skin from 7-DHC when the skin is exposed to UV rays. It is also found in animal foods like oily fish, cheese, eggs, and lichen also. That is not animal food, but lichen is a mix of algae and mushroom. But you can find both forms of vitamins. You can find vitamin D2 and D3 in lichen. But the best sources are really the animal sources. So here also cholecalciferol is inactive. It needs to be converted in the liver and in the kidney, and it's after it's converted in the kidneys to calcitriol that it is the active form of vitamin D. So just for you to know, when they test your levels of vitamin D in your blood, they not always, but most of the time they test for calcifediol. Okay, that is 25 HOD. But yeah, the active form is the other one, 1.25 DHOD, OH. So cholecalciferol, like we saw before for vitamin D2, is inactive, and it needs to get activated in the liver and in the kidneys. Okay, so you need to know that when you test your blood levels for vitamin D, they usually test for calcifediol, they don't test calcitriol. Okay, so if you have like kidney disease, if you have some type of problems in your kidneys, it might show in your blood test that you have good levels of vitamin D, but if your kidneys can't do the conversion to the active form, then you will actually not have the active form of vitamin D in your body. So that was just a parenthesis that you need to know. Animals and humans can meet all or part of their vitamin D3 needs through food. Okay, so either food, either sunshine, even better if it's from both sources. Okay, and all of these metabolites are linked in the blood to the vitamin D binding protein. Ergocalciferol and its metabolites have a lower affinity for the vitamin D binding protein than the D3 counterparts. So again, vitamin D2 is less effective than vitamin D3. Here again, it's it explains the different types of conversion. I let you pause it and watch it more in details if you want. Where is vitamin D stored in the body? So vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So this is very important to know. There are two types of vitamins, fat-soluble and water-soluble. When I did my video about vitamin C is water-soluble. And I said in my video that vitamin C, because it is water-soluble, cannot be stored in the body. So I will explain that. Vitamin C, it kind of stored like vitamin Bs and that are also water soluble. Water soluble vitamins are kind of stored in some organs in the body. But because they are water soluble, if you take like tons of them one day, your body will take what it needs, what it can do with it in the moment. It will store a little bit of it, some of it in the organs, in some of the organs, but then you will excrete the rest, okay? You will pee it out or, through feces. It doesn't work like that for fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins, if you get tons of it one day, it will get stored in your fat for months and months until your body needs it again, okay? So fat-soluble vitamins can be stored long-term in your body. What does it mean? It means that water-soluble vitamins, you need to get them in your diet very regularly, every day, or as often as possible. But fat-soluble vitamins, you don't need them every day because it gets stored in your fat. So if one day you get a lot of fat-soluble vitamins because you spend lots of time in the sun and you ate, cod livers and stuff like that, you will get lots of vitamin D and other fat-soluble vitamins. It will get stored in your fat, and then it doesn't matter if you don't eat any, fat-soluble vitamins for a week or two, because you still have the reserves of the ones you ate like 2 weeks ago, okay? So this is the main difference. I wanted to emphasize that because I think most people don't realize that. Okay, so vitamin D is fat-soluble. It is mainly stored in body fat and in the liver also, but mainly in the body fat. The stores of vitamin D in body fat are used during winter when little vitamin D is produced in the skin, okay? So here, two pictures. This man who is very shredded, he has no fat on his body. This is not good. This is not healthy, because this guy, he will have to get fat-soluble vitamins in his diet all the time because he doesn't have storage in his fat. So this is not healthy. It's actually healthier to have like a little bit of fat on the belly, like the other picture. That's what I have, by the way. So actually, I'm happy about it. But yeah, it's much healthier to have some fat like that rather than to be like this guy. So what does vitamin D do? Vitamin D increases intestinal absorption of calcium, phosphate, mainly calcium and phosphate, and a little bit of magnesium, but much less, okay? So we know that with vitamin D, the body can absorb 20 times more calcium. Vitamin D is necessary for the mineralization of bones, teeth, and joints, and it's necessary for muscle tone. It allows parathyroid hormone to function properly to maintain serum calcium levels. Okay? Vitamin D influences over 200 genes and it repairs DNA. It is also necessary for immune function. Vitamin D promotes the creation of serotonin. The production of serotonin is directly proportional to the amount of sunlight the body receives. Serotonin is the happy hormone, okay? But as we will see later, it's not all about vitamin D, it's about the sun actually. And vitamin D regulates cell multiplication. So what are the symptoms of vitamin D deficiency? It's mainly symptoms of demineralization, okay? Decreased bone mineral density with diseases like osteoporosis, rickets. You will break your bones more often. You will have bone pain, muscle pain, loss of muscle mass and strength, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, growth retardation for kids, low immunity, pale skin, eczema or psoriasis. Vitamin D regulates cell proliferation. Most people who have eczema and psoriasis, they have experienced that their eczema or psoriasis gets much better during summer, That's because of vitamin D. Cancers, you have more risk of cancers if you have vitamin D deficiency. And if you have melanoma, vitamin D deficiency at the time of diagnosis is associated with a worse prognosis in melanoma. Patients with stage 4 melanoma had a twofold worse prognosis if they suffered from vitamin D deficiency at diagnosis. So you are told not to go in the sun if you have melanoma, but not going in the sun makes it worse. Okay, it's the sun exposure that is beneficial. It's not the supplementation in synthetic vitamin D. We will detail that a little later. And if you have vitamin deficiency, you have higher risks of developing chronic diseases such as multiple sclerosis, diabetes, heart disease, autism, Alzheimer's, and so on. And regarding pale skin, your body is intelligent. As I say in almost all of my videos, your body is intelligent. If you have pale skin, it's because you don't have enough vitamin D. Your body makes melatonin, that is the natural sunscreen, when it knows that it has enough vitamin D. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you will stay pale. When you start getting enough vitamin D, natural vitamin D, not synthetic, your body will start making melanin, and so making the natural sunscreen. Okay, so if you are the type of person very pale, go in the sun, and without sunscreen, we will talk about it, but it means you have low vitamin D. So what are the causes of deficiency in vitamin D? Basically, it's mainly low sun exposure, or it's because of a vegan diet, basically, but we will talk about it. So low sun exposure, if you live in a place with very bad climate all the time. If you live in England, for example, in the Netherlands, where it's always gray, clouds, complete cloud cover reduce UV lights by 50%. Okay, that's huge. If you put sunscreen every time you go in the sun, if you put sunscreen, you can't, synthesize vitamin D from the sun. If you always have long clothing, same. If you shower immediately after sun exposure, if you have dark skin, you will need much longer times in the sun to convert enough vitamin D. If you have a vegan diet, you have more risks because, as we saw, you have vitamin D mainly in animal food. You have some vitamin D in plant foods, but really not as much and not as efficient. We will talk about that in the other slides. If you are older, the expression of vitamin D receptors decrease with age. Someone who is older than 70 years old needs 3 to 4 times longer sun exposure than a child to get the same amount of synthesis of vitamin D in the skin. If you have gut disease, you can get deficient because you won't be able to absorb your vitamin D from food properly. If you have fat malabsorption, it's the same, because if you can't absorb your fat, vitamin D is fat soluble, so you won't absorb it correctly. If you are obese, we will detail that in the next slide. If you eat food with glyphosate, if you don't eat organic, glyphosate disrupts the enzyme ENOS for sulfate synthesis. Glyphosate induces melanin deficiency. Okay, this is detailed in an article that you can find on the Weston A. Price Foundation website, written by Stephanie Seneff. She's like the specialist about glyphosate and all the toxicity of glyphosate. Groups at risk. So we partly talk about it. So infants, the elderly, people with darker skin, people with gut disease, people with fat malabsorption, obese people. These are the groups at risk for vitamin D deficiency. So obesity does not affect the skin's ability to synthesize vitamin D, but larger amounts of subcutaneous fat sequester more vitamin and modify its release into the circulation. Obese people who have gastric bypass surgery, may become deficient in vitamin D over time because part of the upper part of the small intestine where vitamin D is absorbed is bypassed, and vitamin D mobilized into the serum from the stored fat may not compensate over time. Patients with gut disease had a 64 higher risk of vitamin D deficiency than controls in some studies. And a high grain diet plus low sun exposure is the perfect recipe for rickets. So, regarding people with dark skin, black skin, okay, so they need longer time in the sun to synthesize vitamin D compared to white people. For example, a white person who stays in the sun 20 minutes will, synthesize a good amount of vitamin D. People with black skin will have to stay in the sun at least 3 times longer than white people to synthesize the same amount of vitamin D, at least 3 times. So a white person will stay 20 minutes in the sun. A black person will need to stay at least 1 hour in the sun to get the same amount of vitamin D. Okay? So, but one study shows that actually black people won't have the same levels of vitamin D in their blood. So it's an important criteria if you are black, if you have dark skin, and if you get your vitamin D levels tested, think about this study. Okay? In this study, they measured the bone mass density of several people with different skin colors. They found that 25 OHD levels, so that's what they measured, the vitamin D after it was converted in the liver, in the blood. So 25 OHD levels were highest amongst whites and lowest amongst blacks. But bone mass density was highest among blacks. The IOM, Institute of Medicine, states that African Americans present a conundrum because although their serum values are lower than those of the white counterparts, their rates of osteoporosis and fractures are lower than Caucasians. Thus, it appears that when interpreting blood test results, racial differences should be considered as they may influence recommendation for vitamin D supplementation. So black people don't need... so when you do a blood test for vitamin D, the normal range is the normal range for white people, okay? Not for black people, okay? So if they tell you you don't have enough vitamin D, this is for the white people, the normal range for white people. Black people don't need as much in their blood to be healthy, to have good bone mass density, okay? I just wanted to talk about that because I think it's important. So what are the main vitamin D sources? Well, it's mainly the sun and animal fat, okay? Something interesting, vitamin D is heat and air stable. It was shown in a study made in 1922 by McCollum. He showed that cod liver oil aerated at the temperature of boiling water for 12 to 20 hours retained its anti-rheumatic activity in rats, but it was ineffective against xerophthalmia. That is a disease caused by the lack of vitamin A. So vitamin D is not so sensitive to heat or air compared to other vitamins, but vitamin A is more sensitive. Some studies have been made in 1923. They irradiated a wide variety of substances, including herbs and various vegetable oils, and they reported that the process of irradiating UV light on these foods increased the vitamin D content of these foods. Okay, some other studies show that some plants have actually D3. So we think D3 is only in animal foods, but no, it is in plant foods also, in very small quantities compared to animal foods, but there is some D3. And I have a study that talks about, they studied 2 plants from the nightshades family, including tomatoes. And after UV treatments, they had some vitamin D3. Not a lot, but some. Of course, you can't count on only vegetables to get enough vitamin D in your diet, but I think it's a detail that was interesting. Full body exposure of pale skin to summer sunshine for 30 minutes without clothing or sunscreen can result in a synthesis of between 10,000 and 20,000 IU of vitamin D. We will see in the next slides how much IUs we need per day. Green algae and lichen have both vitamin D2 and D3. But again, the best sources are animal foods. In 1925, Cowell demonstrated that bovine milk exposed for 20 minutes under a mercury vapor lamp that makes UV light could be used to treat rickets. So it's actually interesting to get more vitamin D in your food before eating it. Put it in the sun, and make sure that you buy, real food, vegetables that were grown outside and not in I forgot the name, you know what I mean. But yeah, and when you drink milk, you can put it in the sun for 20 minutes before drinking it. You will get some more vitamin D from that. So how can you optimize your vitamin D production with the sun? So as we said, white skin within 20 minutes of UV exposure. The pre-vitamin D concentration in the skin reaches equilibrium in white skin within 20 minutes of UV exposure. It takes 3 to 6 times longer for dark skin, we said that. And aging decreases the amount of 7-dehydrocholesterol in the skin. So you need to spend more time in the sun if you are older than 65, 70 years old. And you can your skin can synthesize vitamin D not only from the sun. If you can't have access to the sun, let's say in winter, if you are in the UK or in a place where you don't have sun most of the year, you can go in tanning beds. Okay, UV lamps, tanning beds, they produce UVBs, and you can get vitamin D from that. Be aware that if you get sunshine through a window, you don't have UVBs coming through the window. So you can't synthesize vitamin D if you get sunshine from a window. If you use sunscreen, SPF 8 reduces the skin ability to produce vitamin D3 by 95%. SPF 15 by more than 98%. Okay, so don't use sunscreen. Trust your body. Okay, your body makes its natural sunscreen, that is melanin. Okay, and if you live in Northern Europe, if you live in Northern America, in winter, you won't have the ability to synthesize vitamin D from the sunshine. Okay, above 37 degrees latitude. Okay, so you need to get in the sun during spring, summer, and autumn. In winter, you can't get enough vitamin D because you are too much in the north. Get your sun exposure between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Okay, that's where you will get the most vitamin D synthesized in your skin. Okay, and of course you need to start slow. In the spring, when you start going back in the sun, if you have a very pale skin, spend only 2 minutes the first day in the sun. Then the day after that 4 minutes, the day after that 6 minutes, the day after that 10 minutes. Okay, little by little, and little by little you will replenish your vitamin D, and therefore when you will get enough, your body will slowly and naturally make melanin to protect the skin. Okay, always go slowly, but that's the best way to get your vitamin D from the sun. So to give you an idea, here this is the 37th parallel north. Okay, so if you are it's the closer you are from the equator, then you will synthesize vitamin D from sunshine all year long. You don't need to worry. But above this line, you can't synthesize vitamin D in winter. What are the best sources? What are the best food sources? As we said, it's mainly from animal fat and particularly fatty fish, okay? Fish liver oil, fatty fish. It doesn't matter how you prepare it. As we said, vitamin D is heat stable and air stable, so you can cook fish. You will still have good amounts of vitamin D. Of course, raw is always better, but you can cook it and you still have vitamin D. You have smaller amounts in egg yolks, liver, meat, and cheese compared to fatty fish. Okay, so for vitamin D2, it's mainly in mushroom. Okay, as we said, vitamin D2 is not as effective as vitamin D3. There was a study made on chickens. Chickens were given irradiated yeast, and it showed minimal anti-rickets effects, while cod liver oil reversed the effects of rickets. And in a study of 20 healthy human volunteers, researchers found that the potency of vitamin D2 is less than a third of that of vitamin D3, based on its ability to raise serum 25-OH levels. OHD levels. So the best food sources for vitamin D3: fatty fish, liver, eggs, animal fat. To give you an idea, 85 grams or 3.5 ounces of salmon has 360 IU. Okay, we will see in the next slide how much IUs we need. Okay, and in one egg yolk, it's about 50 IU. It's not so much. This is a list of different foods rich in vitamin D3. So what dosage? The recommended dosage, the RDA for adults, is 600 IU or 15 micrograms. Okay, 600 IU. My favorite source for vitamin D is canned cod liver. This is the picture I've put here. This is a French brand, but canned cod liver is the best way of getting, natural vitamin D in an easy way. You can find canned cod liver almost everywhere in every supermarket. If you don't find it in supermarkets, you can buy it on Amazon. When you buy it, just make sure that it doesn't come from the Baltic Sea, that is very polluted. Choose canned cod liver that was fish around Iceland. Okay, so Iceland is quite pristine, and if you buy fish or canned cod liver that was fish over there, it's great. Here, for example, this can is about 120 grams, and these are the nutritional values for this brand. So for 100 grams, so actually there's a little more in the can, for 100 grams you have 56 micrograms of vitamin D. Okay, that's almost 4 times the RDA. Okay, and again, it gets stored in your body fat. Okay, so if you eat one can like that, you're good to go for 4 days. Okay, so during winter, I recommend to eat, 1 or 2, at least 1 can of canned cod liver per week. 2 is even better. To achieve maximum efficiency of intestinal calcium transport induced by vitamin D, serum concentration should be 25-OHG concentration should be at least 30 nanograms per milliliter. Okay, this is for maximum efficiency. Okay, this is not the minimum dosage recommended. It's for maximum efficiency, 30 nanograms. The efficiency of calcium absorption in the small intestine increases with higher serum, 25-OHG levels, reaching a plateau of 32 nanograms. Okay, so this is important because it's been a few years that there's this craze about vitamin D, and everybody has to supplement with vitamin D, with synthetic vitamin D made in a lab, because they say that we need at least 50, sometimes they say 60 nanograms per milliliters. Okay, but look what I just read, sorry. To achieve maximum efficiency, 30 nanograms. Above 32, you reach a plateau. You can't get better. So there's no point of getting a number above 32 nanograms per milliliter. What they say that you need to reach 40, 50, 60 is a lie. It is not true. It is impossible to reach 50 or 60 nanograms without synthetic supplementation. Okay, so if you have 30 nanograms, that's great. If they tell you it's too little, it's not true. And also it depends when you will test your blood for vitamin D. If you test it during winter, it is normal that you have a low amount in your blood. If you have 20, don't go crazy saying, oh my God, because it is winter. At the end of winter, it's normal. Your body, don't have as much. It's normal. And your body will use what is in the fat. So it's okay if it's not in the blood, because it will use what is in the fat. Okay? If you really want to test your vitamin D levels in your blood, do it at the end of summer, and it will give you an idea. Will you have enough, for winter? They actually don't test how much you have in your fat, but it will give you an idea with what you have in your blood in that moment, if you had a good amount, if you accumulated a good amount during summer. So anyway, don't go crazy if you have less than 30. 30 is great. 30 nanograms is great. My personal experience, I lived for 3 years in Latin America. For the last 8 months, I spent 1 hour every day on the roof of my building, tanning in the sun, front and back, 1 hour every day for 8 months. Plus 2 years before that, where I was regularly in the sun in Latin America. When I came back to France, I did a blood test to measure my vitamin D levels. I had 38 nanograms per liter. 38 by spending almost my whole life for 3 years in Latin America. Can I get higher than 38? I don't think so. If I can get higher of that if I take synthetic supplements. But naturally, I'm sure I cannot get more than that. I'm not saying you can't. Maybe some people can naturally achieve higher numbers. But again, above 30 is great. You don't need more than that. Okay? So now, vitamin D in animals. I know I was curious about that. So if you are curious, here you can find some answers, because you can be curious, like, how do animals get vitamin D if they have fur or feathers? Birds have a gland on their rump which produces an oil rich in provitamin D, which they spread on their feathers with their beaks. If this gland is removed, they develop rickets. In fur-bearing mammals, fur blocks UV rays from reaching the skin. Instead, vitamin D is created from oily secretions in the skin deposited on the fur, and they think the cats, for example, they get vitamin D by grooming, and they get it orally during grooming, like on the picture. Nocturnal animals obtain their vitamin D by consuming fruits and fungi exposed to UV light during the day. Now, toxicity of isolated vitamin D, synthetic vitamin D, isolated vitamin D, it's kind of the same. Even if, vitamin D3 is extracted from the wool of sheep, so it's kind of natural, but it's isolated. This is the problem. It is isolated, okay? Again, I have a whole article about the dangers of isolated vitamins. I've put the link under this video, so please go read this article if you want some references, if you want to read scientific studies. So actually, most studies show that the problem with vitamin D supplementation is with huge amounts of IU per day. But even moderate amounts like 10,000 IU per day are a problem. We will see that in the next slides. So what will happen if you take too much synthetic or isolated vitamin D? Hypercalcemia. Okay, you will have an accumulation of calcium in your tissues. Vitamin D naturally never comes alone. It comes with vitamin K, It also works with vitamin A, probably also with vitamin E. Okay, it works with different minerals, as we saw. It never comes on its own. So when you bring it alone, only vitamin D without its cofactors in your body, you will have issues, amongst them hypercalcemia. Okay, so vitamin K is in charge of putting calcium where it needs to go, the teeth and the bones. Without vitamin K, vitamin D will make your body absorb tons of calcium, and it will get stuck somewhere in your tissues, okay, in your joints, in your organs, in your arteries, in your blood vessels, and then you develop risks of kidney stones, cardiovascular diseases, calcification of blood vessels, bone loss, etc. Okay, toxicity is reduced by high intakes of vitamin A, because we said they work together. Okay. In the 1930s, vitamin D was the new miracle vitamin, like it has been for the last 15 years. It's the same. Every 10-15 years, there's a new miracle vitamin or something, that will make the whole world buy something made in a lab, and that's great money for pharmaceuticals, and it will poison you on the long run. So it's even better money for them if they poison you on the long run. So in the 1930s, vitamin D was the new miracle vitamin, and many products were fortified with vitamin D2, including peanut butter in the US, hot dogs, soda pop, and bread. A brewery in Milwaukee introduced beer containing vitamin D2. Europe also fortified dairy products with vitamin D2, and after World War II, vitamin D fortification process was not carefully monitored, and large excess amounts of vitamin D were added to some milk products, causing an outbreak of vitamin D intoxication amongst infants and young children. This led to the banning of vitamin D fortification of dairy products in most European countries. That remains to this day. But unfortunately in Europe, we can find some margarine and some cereals that are fortified with vitamin D. Chris Masterjohn, that is a researcher. You will find some articles written by him on the Western Aid Prize Foundation website. So his analysis indicate that levels of 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter of vitamin D are not natural. That's what I was telling you earlier. So I was saying like above 50 or 60 is not natural. Chris Masterjohn, he thinks it's even what is above 40 that is not natural. Okay, so again, you don't need higher than 30. 30 is great. I always like to show these wheels, and even the vitamin 1 is actually not entirely complete, because you don't see the link between A and D, for example, or D and E, but it shows the interaction between all the vitamins and minerals, between the minerals. You never find one mineral alone or one vitamin alone in nature. They always come with their cofactors. If you supplement with one synthetic vitamin, or one synthetic or one isolated mineral, or one isolated amino acid, it will create problems, because they need to come with their cofactors. You will find more details about that in my article about synthetic vitamins. The toxicity of high doses of vitamin D. So here you can find 3 different studies. They found that high amounts of supplementation of vitamin D, 4,000 IUs, that are actually not considered as so high. So 4,000 IUs or 10,000 IUs resulted in significant lower radial bone mass density, okay, but not with 400 IUs. So even people who tell you, it's only 4,000 or 10,000 per day, some studies show that even at these doses, it's not good. This other study shows that IOM cautions against maintaining serum 25 OHD concentration above 50 nanograms. And the problem with obese people is that they can store lots of vitamin D in their fat, and the day where they start losing fat, not even a lot of fat, the day when they start losing weight, they can have, if they supplemented with like synthetic vitamin D, they will have a lot stored in their fat. And so again, when they lose weight, they can have like so much vitamin D released in the blood that it can be really toxic. And the sun is more potent than vitamin D alone. The sun is more important. Okay, vitamin D is just one thing you get from the sun, but the sun is important for so many things. Like always in our modern world, we like to isolate, little things. We like to go into details instead of looking at the big picture, but it's never the details that makes you healthy, it's the big picture. Okay, so the sun is more important than vitamin D alone. A 2016 paper titled "Sunlight has cardiovascular benefits independently of vitamin D." Okay, I won't read everything. You can pause the video if you want to read it. You will find this article on the Weston A. Price Foundation website. And regarding Parkinson's disease, they found that the people who with the highest time of exposure in the sun had less chances of developing Parkinson, and serum vitamin D levels were highly correlated with degree of sun exposure, but not with vitamin D supplementation. Adequate sunlight exposure to both the skin and the eyes is vital to our long-term health. So it's not only sunshine on the skin, it's through the eyes. So don't spend all summer with sunglasses, okay? The eyes, the sun going through the eyes is a signal for your body to regulate the melanin on the skin, amongst other things. So yeah, be careful. You need sunlight going through your eyes for so many things. And to finish, as I said in one of my previous videos, I try to find the truth. It's very complicated, you know that. Studies say one thing and they say the contrary. So my personal tip, what I do to try to find the truth or to get closer to the truth as possible, I use scientific studies. But this is not enough because, as I say, you can find one study on one thing, one study that says the opposite. So scientific studies, I also use common sense. To me, it's common sense to eat whole foods and go in the sun, rather than taking a pill made in a lab. This is common sense for me, okay? Common sense, wise traditions, what did our ancestors do, and experience. I use these 4 things to try to get, close to the truth. So here, wise traditions. I always recommend everybody to read this book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston Price. Okay, so this is an extract of the book. It will be noted that vitamin D, which the human does not readily synthesize in adequate amounts, must be provided by foods of animal tissues or animal products. So Weston Price, at the time, he believed that vitamin D had to come from food. He didn't believe the sun exposure was enough. So this might be debatable, but that was his opinion. So this is also interesting. As yet, I have not found a single group of primitive racial stock which was building and maintaining excellent bodies by living entirely on plant foods. I have found in many parts of the world most devout representatives of modern ethical systems advocating the restriction of foods to the vegetable products. In every instance where the groups involved had been long under this teaching, I found evidence of degeneration in the form of dental caries and in the new generation in the form of abnormal dental arches to an extent very much higher than in the primitive groups who were not under this influence. So that's what he observed. Vegan diets are detrimental to health. Okay, he was himself a vegetarian, so he was actually disappointed that he could not find, tribes that didn't eat animal food or very little and that were healthy. They were never as healthy as, tribes eating lots of animal foods. This is another extract of the book. Since the vitamin D group of activators is absent from nearly all plant products, but must be synthesized in animal bodies from the plant foods, where it is largely stored in organs, an adequate source had to be provided. And he talks about the Indians of Peru. So the Indians of Highland of Peru maintained colonies of guinea pigs, which were used in their stews. The ancient burials also show that the guinea pigs was a common source of food since mummified bodies of the animal were found. This is significant since of all the animals that are used for experimental work, the guinea pig is probably the most efficient in synthesizing vitamin D from plant food. Okay, they apparently played a very important part in the physical excellence of the ancient cultures. And last one, probably every housewife is familiar with the low melting quality of the butter produced in early summer when the cows have been put on the green pastures. This is particularly true of butter that has the grassy flavor and the deep yellow to orange color. This butter is usually several times as high in fat-soluble activators, including vitamin A and D, as butter produced from stall-fed cattle or cattle on poorer pasturage. Okay, so when you buy butter, if the butter is completely white, you can be sure that it's, very devoid of vitamins. If the butter is yellow, or even better, deep yellow orange, it is rich in vitamin A and vitamin D. Okay, that's it for today. I have a course on how to heal your gut. I have many videos on my channel on how to heal your gut naturally. So my course includes, a live Q&A where you can ask me your question. I personalize the protocol for you. I customize the protocol for you to heal your gut. So I will put the link under this video if you're interested. I invite you to visit my website, thecandidaslayer.com, where I have a blog where I write articles about natural health and how to heal the gut. Okay, I see you in the next video. If you have questions, if you want to talk about vitamin D, we can talk about it in the comments under this video. I see you in the next video. Bye bye.